Talk over drink.
Talks over drinks. Talks over.
All right, all right. Well, welcome to another episode of Talks Over Drinks. Again, my name is Corey Fauconier. I'm your host, and I'd like to introduce my partner in justice to God, Markel Prines. Markel,
What's
how you
going
doing
on?
today?
I'm doing good, bro. I'm doing good. And I can see you laughing right now because I know you want to see what I have to say about this. So everybody, this is rare form for me. Normally, I have my hustle hat on and I have this covered up. But today was one of those days where I had to, take care of what I needed to take care of. I had to let the soul glow, so to speak. I had to let the fro out. I had to let my inner Frederick Douglass out. So definitely I had to do it. And this is what you guys get. But that brings me to today's food for action message. Basically, come as you are, because either way, you're gonna be loved or hated no matter what you do. But just make sure that what you come with is worth making them choose the side of love rather than the
That's
side of
right.
hate.
That's right. I
So let's
got
get
that.
to it.
I got that. Okay, then we're going to segue to my brother of another color, Jeff Kleb over in Germany. Sir, what's going on, Jeff?
Schönen Abend. Yeah, we're having fun. I've got my glass of white Trocken, which means dry wine, Weisswein. I'm just chilling out, and I'm sporting the Telly Savalas look. That goes a little better for me than the Frederick trying to do Frederick Douglass.
Young people
So
don't know who that is.
I hope you gentlemen are having a good evening, but I guess it's still afternoon over where you are.
Yeah, so it's six a little after 1600. I got what do I have? I have cranberry and vodka. That's my
There you go.
that's my off duty beverage of the day. And any thoughts, Jeff, before we segue into our guest?
No, I just hope that you get your truck fixed. I know you've been having
Yeah.
a lot of issues with that, and we over here we're going to be stateside in a little over a month from now. We'll be back in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We'll be saying Auf Wiedersehen to Deutschland.
Yeah.
We had somebody come and look at our apartment, and another American couple, and they've got two small kids, and they said they want to take it over when we move out. So that'll save us a lot of headache with the landlord. So we're
Okay.
good to go in that respect.
Okay. Well, we'll be happy to have you back stateside. We can get into a whole lot more trouble that way. So
Oh yeah.
definitely do that. So our guest today on the last minute tip, and we appreciate you for being here, Major Mike Webb, out of Alexandria, Virginia. Is that correct?
Arlington, but it's close enough.
Arlington.
It's
Okay.
close enough. Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you
Arlington,
so much.
Virginia. And I met Mike several years ago. Through some political work, and the reason why I felt it important for him to join us is because he's one of those patriots that has had a long-standing legal battle with the government of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as the United States of America, due to the COVID-19, the introduction of COVID-19, and his perspective with regard to it being germ warfare used against the citizens of the world. So I'm gonna let Mike kind of introduce himself and tell us, Mike, what made you number one decide to champion this cause, and what do you want to try to educate people with regard to your perspective on the battle with COVID-19?
Yeah, sure. I didn't plan to attack the pandemic. The pandemic kind of got in my way. Back in 2020, I was trying to get on the ballot as a Republican. I had to go out and get signatures to try to get on the ballot, and the pandemic got in the way.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I mean, especially up in Northern Virginia, this is the Kingmaker Congressional District. Just saying the pandemic got in the way was not enough of an argument, so I had to look at the pandemic. and try to find out, well, what exactly is arbitrary about what they're doing? What exactly is an abuse of discretion? And I kind of lucked out because 30 years ago, I used to do biological warfare for the Army. Uh, it began to dawn on me uh, as I got more and more into the litigation, more and more into the frustrations in terms of defendants running away, people not wanting to go to court. Back in 2016, the Defense Intelligence Agency had reached out to me, trying to offer me a job. I hadn't applied for the job. Just all of a sudden, out of the blue, while I was running for Congress, DIA wants to offer me a job. I happen to be a former biological warfare kind of guy. Why am I being asked to do a job that I didn't ask to do 4 years ago about biological warfare? That concerned me. As I got more and more into court, running into the governor running away, the sheriffs refusing to serve process, I began to start to put two and two together that this is not what it appears to be. And when you look at when we say something is highly contagious, uh, we don't have a number attached to that. But when you're doing biological warfare planning, you're going to be looking for some very specific numbers, and you're going to know those very, very early. One of these numbers is secondary attack rate. What are your chances of catching this disease? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 60%? If it's not at 60%, this is not a highly contagious disease like smallpox, measles, 90%, chickenpox, 90%. But the World Health Organization did a very, very good job at the beginning of the pandemic, late January to mid-February. They sent in 1,800 teams of at least 5 epidemiologists. That's a lot of epidemiologists running around China. They examined 55,924 cases. That's 19 times more cases than we had yet reported in the entire United States. And the number that they came up with was less than 5%. That's your chances of a 2-number combination winning at roulette. I don't know anybody who is trying to get vaccinated from winning roulette. That's a very, very low number. It's also 12 times too low to be called a highly contagious disease. If you don't have a highly contagious disease, you can't have a super spreader. It just can't happen. As late as May 7th, 2021, the Centers for Disease Control, they still had not published what that number was. That's concerning because we should have that number. It sounded like we were treating it as classified information. The other number was infectious dose. How many of these little tiny particles have to get on me to get me sick? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? We had a guy, his name is Jasper Fuk Wu Chan. He decided he was going to look at hamsters. He's going to look at hamsters, put the little hamster inside a little cage and try to put these particles into that hamster's nose. How many particles go in? Highly contagious disease, we stop at 15. I don't know why this guy had 10 million particles to try to put inside this hamster. That's concerning. Where did he get 10 million particles to put into a hamster in like February 2020? That sounds like somebody may have supplied him with a whole lot more of this disease than he should have. But what he found was the least resistant hamster, you require 100,000 particles. Now, coronaviruses are large viruses. They're so large that we don't measure them in nanometers like we do normal viruses. We measure them in microns. You can fit about 350 microns inside the space of a period. Now, this 100,000 particles to infect this hamster, what that would look like is a throw rug basically about 2 inches shorter than Anthony Fauci, about 5'5" That's a lot of coronavirus to go into your nose. You take that all at one time, you're going to asphyxiate before you catch COVID-19. So this could not be a highly contagious disease like they're saying. The most resistant hamster, super mighty mouse hamster, we required 10 million of these particles. Now take that same throw rug and magnify it so that it can cover the entire Washington Monument. That's a lot of virus. I mean, you would have to be trying to snort this virus in order to get it. When we've looked at studies, what we found, there was one gentleman, uh, he had caught COVID-19 in Wuhan in January of 2020. He traveled 614 miles on a train. The thought is that if he has this disease, he's spreading it around the train, he's spreading it around to the people that he's with. He doesn't. This is kind of like Patrick Dempsey in the movie Outbreak. He's on the bus, he's got the little monkey and this whole thing. He's coughing, he's sneezing, he's sweating. But even in the movie, they kind of treated that kind of funny because Patrick Dempsey and that monkey hopped off the bus in Cedar Springs. And what happened was all of his little viruses lined up in single file and followed him off that bus. That's not supposed to happen. The virus is supposed to stay on the bus, and we continue to have a problem. When you see that kind of pattern, it looks more like the virus is not coming off or the sickness is not coming off that person. It's something that's at the location. And when this gentleman with 3 members of his family, after traveling 614 miles from Wuhan to Guangzhou, he went to a hotel. He got up the next morning. He went to breakfast, but then he went to lunch. Dining room about 145 square meters, but only that place where he was in the restaurant, little 30 square meter section in the corner. Those are the only people that caught COVID-19. The first people we would expect to get COVID-19 are probably the people he was on the train with. They didn't get COVID-19 first. Instead, it was the people under the air conditioner. That sounds like maybe this virus, he happened to have it, but they caught it from the air conditioner, not from him. The next people that got the virus were the people at his table. The next people that got the virus were the people behind him. Again, it seems like this virus is moving from the air conditioner and going across the room and only infecting these people. They have 8 staff members inside this restaurant coming in and out, delivering dishes, taking away dishes. None of them caught COVID-19. That also tells you this is not a highly contagious disease. I should be able to come up to you, stand in your face, you put some COVID-19 on me, boom, I'm infected. Didn't happen. Only the people in this 30 square meter area of the restaurant. It didn't blow anyplace else. I also used to do a lot of like riot agent, the privates in basic training with tear gas and all this. If you take that smoke grenade that's got the tear gas in it, that's going to produce a cloud exactly 30 square meters, exactly the radius of the diameter of this area where people were infected. Everything about this study seems to suggest that this is not a casual contact disease. Also, they found that these people had to be immersed inside this disease for at least an hour. That's not a highly contagious disease. Consistently throughout pandemic, regardless of what variant we've had, the original Alpha variant, the Omicron variant, the Delta variant, one thing that the scientists keep saying, and this is a key word, it's kind of like in psychology, people say lack of awareness is a bad thing for somebody to say about you. Bad thing for somebody to say about an infectious disease is no wider community spread. That's saying that, in fact, we had the same situation in Provincetown. Over 1,000 fully vaccinated gay men running around in Provincetown. They all happened to catch, well, the connection that they all had was they were all at indoor events. Nobody seemed to catch COVID-19 anyplace else. It's always indoor events. But what happened was that they were not leaving these parties and going to 7-Eleven and giving the guy at 7-Eleven COVID-19. Why not? They were not going to the hotel. They were not going anywhere and giving this disease. That right there says it has to be something that's tied to the location. But even more significant, the CDC went back in September of 2021 to look at these cases. They did genome sequencing. We can look at a virus just like we can do with bullets on a gun. We can trace it to a particular person, like doing ballistics. What they found was these 1,000 men all got infected apparently by the same guy. Um, I just highly doubt that one guy had sex with 1,000 men. But what this tells us is that it was not one person that infected 1,000 particular guys. This is the same batch. It's all coming out of the same factory. It's all coming out of the same plant. And this is another thing that we've seen in COVID-19. Um, your Delta variant in the United States is different from your Delta variant in Europe, different from the one in the UK, different from the one in China, different from the one in India. In fact, Christian Anderson, our proximal origins specialist, who says this thing didn't come out of a lab, he was able to tell us that he has a study. It's actually up on his Scripps Research website. We have a different variant in every state. You should have crossover, spillover. If I go over to DC, I should be catching a virus, bringing it back, and we should have a bunch of these viruses interspersing. But rather, what we're seeing is that if you were in New Jersey, you have New Jersey coronavirus. If you were in Virginia, you have Virginia coronavirus. The reason why we do that in biological warfare is because that's a control measure. We want to make sure that this virus hasn't taken a life of its own. If suddenly we see virus kind of spill over, then we're going to get worried. Then we're going to have like an ending, like an outbreak, where we go and nuke somebody because we can't control it anymore.
Let me ask you this, Mike.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
with all that being said,
Yeah.
what made you actually begin your court battle with the government to get some of your questions answered or to make the government respond to some of your concerns?
Yeah, well, actually, literally, the first case was just me trying to get on a ballot. But what happened was that early on, I started to see people acting strange. That there was something else going on, and so I guess kind of the COVID-19 outlived the campaign. The 2020 race is long and gone, but I still had this issue in terms of, wait a second, why are you causing people to close their businesses? Why are you telling people they have to wear these masks? And so I kind of stayed on in it. In fact, as early as February 2020, the World Health Organization, nice 40-page report, even its author said nobody read this report. They told us on like page 15, asymptomatic infection had nothing to do with 75,000 cases of COVID-19 in China. They even put this word, asymptomatic infection, in that like bold type that you see in a third grade science book. When you're in the third grade and you see the bold type, that means you have to look the word up. 3, 4 years have passed by. Probably nobody sat there and said, wait a second, asymptomatic infection, what does that mean? It doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. Doctors have two different words that they use. First, you have symptoms, symptomatic signs of infection. In order to determine what is a symptom, I have to put a thermometer in your mouth. I have to ask you, does your stomach hurt? Does your head hurt? I am doing some sort of interaction with you to try to find out what's going on inside you. Also, if I administer you a test, if I give you a COVID-19 test, that's a differential diagnostic means that we try to figure out what's going on with you. Asymptomatic signs of infection, however, anybody can see. I can see you sneeze. I can see you cough. These are things that I can observe. Uh, we kind of, as non-clinicians, we don't use these words. And so this is kind of like in law, you have terms of art. Doctors have terms of art and they use it against the population during pandemic. They never told people, hey guys, they found no asymptomatic spread in China, so your masks are entirely useless. It has nothing to do with coughing and sneezing. Well, if it doesn't have anything to do with coughing and sneezing, what does it have to do with? That's this other thing we don't talk about. And so what ended up happening was that my first challenge was really just against the lockdowns because I was trying to get out, get on a ballot, and I needed to have the economy kind of opened up so I could get people. Oh, and the next challenge was the mask because about 10 years before the pandemic, the NIOSH, which is a division of CDC, they had done a study. They had done a challenge study trying to test the ludicrous proposition of one-ply cotton being impervious to microbial penetration. They used the same diagnostic equipment that we use to rate the N95, and not surprisingly, they found out that it doesn't work. When the CDC, when the World Health Organization, whenever in the early parts of the pandemic, when they were talking about the spread of the virus, they used a very, very nuanced phrase, wordsmithing, a lot of, I don't know, grammar specialists or whatever. They used the passive voice, which you're supposed to be taught not to use. And so they said the virus is thought to be spread by droplets being expelled when you cough, sneeze, talk loud. The virus is thought. Are they saying that the CDC thought that? No, they're not. They're not stupid. But somebody hearing it is saying, yeah, I heard that that's how it's being spread. Well, no, that's not how it's being spread. Nobody that they found in China got COVID-19 because somebody coughed or sneezed on them. And if it took 100,000 particles, that's a lot of coughing and sneezing they would have had to have done. The last kind of big like phase litigation that I did was actually trying to find out about these two numbers that we still don't know: infectious dose and also a secondary attack rate, because it sounded like it was classified information. And so what I did was I did a Freedom of Information Act request to the White House on March 23rd, 2021, not long after the first anniversary of the pandemic. I had helped to stand up what's called the Armed Forces Military Intelligence Command. That was kind of our NORAD capability in the 1990s for biological threats. Also, around that time, we were defining what we meant when we said something was classified. So we rewrote the executive order in terms of what is classified. How could we say something's classified? One of those rules, it's Executive Order 12958, is that we cannot classify information if we don't own the information or control it. And so I sat there and I said, wait a second. If these numbers are classified, that means we own this virus that has killed now over 1.1 million Americans. It's beat Hitler in the Holocaust in half the time. But the problem even more is that if we, and this is where we kind of interact with law, if we own this virus because of a couple of court cases, Chakrati, Myriad Genetics, that would mean that it had to have come out of a lab. And so not only do we have something that came out of a lab, it's something we own. That is a lot of the problems that we're having in terms of litigation. People don't want to admit that they killed more people than Hitler.
So let me say this. I'm gonna segue to Jeff. Jeff, do you have a question for Mike?
Well, I find this very fascinating, and there's not a day that goes by when I realize that I like to call them the branch COVIDians, are lying to us.
Yeah.
The way I see it, I tell people say, oh, masks work. I'm like, okay, go out in your car, go to Chipotle for dinner, sit in your car, you got underwear on, you got your jeans on, sit in your car, put a mask on, okay? And then break wind. Do you smell the wind? Yes, you just got COVID, because the COVID virus is smaller than a fart particle. Another thing that I realized is, now I've had COVID 3 times and my wife has had it 5 times, but We both have been vaccinated and boosted. She's been boosted several times. I only got one vaccine, one booster. But anyway, that notwithstanding, we went to Costa Rica in 2021. We went twice, both times, and we came back. We were at the Costa Rica airport. We had to take a COVID test before we could fly back to our own country, while Biden was letting millions and millions of people come across the border, not checked or anything. And in the airport, they had these blue dots that were 6 feet apart on the floor. So you're standing in the corral line, but you got people on beside you a foot and a half away on both sides, but the people in front of you and behind you are 6 feet apart. So the virus only goes straight ahead. It doesn't go left or right. And then they took the area in the terminal and they put tape. They masked off all the chairs because they didn't want people sitting next to each other. So now everybody's standing in a big gaggle on the other half of the side. We're all closer together than we would be if we were sitting down. And and then I thought, okay, so you can't go to a mom and pop flower shop, but you can go to Walmart. You can't go to a restaurant with your mask on or without a mask. You have to put your mask on until you sit down. Then you can take it off. And you can't, some businesses were considered essential. So you can go to the liquor store, but you couldn't go to a card shop. Like you couldn't have an outdoor church service with the preacher talking on the radio. The FBI was writing down license plate numbers and fining people, but yet you could go to a George Floyd protest and everybody could be burning and looting and everything else, and it was perfectly fine. And it's all BS. It is all BS. That little paper surgical mask, I still have the same mask in my car. I think I use the same mask. I don't know. I'd put it on, go into a store, come out, take it off. The thing sat in my glove box of my car for probably a whole year, and I use the same little surgical mask. It's just then I wear glasses for reading. Well, then my glasses fog up. Well, that means that air, unless you're going to walk around like Darth Vader going, Luke, I am your father with a respirator, it's all window dressing. This is all bovine fecal matter. They ever since Dr. Slouchy came out and said, well, you got to wear your mask because we have to follow the science. Well, if you follow the money, you find the science. Yeah. What this guy did, he's going to be long dead and gone by the time people realize what that bastard did to this country and how many billions of dollars his bad advice caused to be destroyed. And then these people putting all these lockdowns are out eating dinner. They're going to nice restaurants. They're they're getting their hair done, everything else. And it's like, when are people gonna, pardon my French, wake the fuck up?
One thing that I think is kind of a saving grace in pandemic is because of double jeopardy. Because of double jeopardy, if we wanted to just go full forward, if I was Fauci, I would say, yeah, put me in front of a jury because they're going to acquit me and I'm going to get off, and now you can't come and get me. Fauci is scared that if he gets in front of a jury, there are going to be enough people that are going to start to put two and two together and figure out, wait a second, we had the wool pulled over us. He's scared of that. He's literally running away from it. But in fact, just today, he kind of doubled back on his crazy thing. He talked about how he caught COVID-19 3 times now, but he gets boosted every time he gets the chance to, when he wears his mask whenever he feels like it. But they are they are actually concerned in terms of people finding out. But also, I call them messages in a bottle. Throughout pandemic, to some extent, they were concerned in case this thing went south. They wanted to have something to kind of walk back. But also, these messages in a bottle that they have inside these science reports and some of these things, this is also this is a way for them to control this. It's kind of like need to know. When you're in the intelligence community, they have certain things that you need to know. We talk about secret compartmented information. what's going to happen is that I'm going to have this piece of the information over here. You're going to have this piece of the information over here. But if you put these two things together, now you've got more of an understanding in terms of what's going on. I ran into something out in the open source, not classified, kind of by this kind of Alice in Wonderland route. If you know about coronaviruses and or at least pretty good familiarity, you know that right now we have 7 human coronaviruses. 7 human coronaviruses. And so, you're sitting around with the coronavirus guys are like 7, 7, 7, 7. Yeah, we got it. Most people, they're not on this level. And so, you sit there, you say 9, you say 5, you say 15. That's not something that's important to you. But if you're a coronavirus guy, 7 is the number. They did a study trying to claim that this thing didn't come out of a lab and it came out of Wuhan. And I sat there, I said, oh, I got to read that because this is the Wuhan folks talking about this crazy virus. Of course, they cite to Christian Anderson's study because he's saying, no, it didn't come out of a lab. But then they cite to another study that is supposed to be trying to say that it didn't come out of a lab. And inside this study, the very, very first paragraph, they have this sentence because there's always kind of an introduction, gets you into the report. And the guy says there are 9 human coronaviruses. If you don't know that number, you're going to go right past that. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, 9? Who says there were 9? Everybody says there were 7. So I started looking for citations. Who is saying there were 9 coronaviruses? And they have not only a citation, an annotation, but they also have the link for you to get to it. So evidently, they wanted whoever wanted to learn more about this virus, click that link. I'm going to make it easy for you. I jump into this link. I'm like Alice in Wonderland going down that rabbit hole. And I get in there, and what do I find? I find a study by John Lidnicki. John Lidnicki he's a guy, he has a PCR test patent. Oh, imagine that. He's got a financial interest in our coronavirus. He doesn't say anything about 9 coronaviruses at all. He did a study, young woman in her 20s. She drove around in a car for 15 minutes. And so if you have this virus, you're going to be breathing it out into the air. And so now, in theory, the virus particles are in the air. They have the air conditioner flowing, so you get maximum kind of spread and all this kind of thing. On the passenger side, the sun visor, they put an air sample collector. This thing is about the size of your Easy Pass. This is not a large piece of equipment. It's on your sun visor. But on this thing, they've got basically like 5 holes. And so the thought is there's virus going around in the air, and you're pretty much going to get a random distribution of virus particles going into the hole. So I should have a pretty much equal number of these particles going down each hole. But what they found with this virus was, and this is another thing that says this is not something that came out of nature. I was in the Ranger Battalion. We like to think we're high speed and all this kind of thing. And so we think that we're more advanced than the normal infantryman. Your normal infantryman knows the principle of mass. If I have a whole lot of guys going against a few guys, I have an advantage. That's easy, easy squeezy. My 9, this is like elections. My 9 beats your 5. However, what happens is that in the Ranger Battalion, we don't spread out when we're moving someplace. What we do is we go in a Ranger file, one behind the other. One thing that's going to do, particularly when you're trying to get into the nose, is you've got little pieces of hair, cilia, that are going to find particles trying to get into your nose. And when it's something it doesn't want, you're going to sneeze it out. But if I want to attack, I want to get through. These guys are jamming in single file. How in the world are little virus particles figuring out where they are, organizing, and going into your nose, one behind the other. The only way that can happen is they were ionized. Some are positive, some are negative. They kind of have like a magnetic kind of thing going so that they can kind of travel in a line.
Okay.
But once this thing gets into the air sample collector, we find something else about this wonderful capability in terms of maximizing mass. The first thing that they did was they defied computational fluid dynamics. They found each other in the air and they only went into one hole. But inside this air sample collector, we don't want to get infected with what we caught in the air. And so there are impacting filters, and that thing is going to come into one of the holes. It's going to hit an impacting filter that's going to start to dry it out, start to evaporate. Then it's going to hit another one and another one. Going to go through 4 of these filters so that when you get to the 4th part of this air sample collector, we call it the death chamber, because whatever got through, it's dead, it's viable, it's dry. It's not going to do anything. But because this virus knows how to mass and go single file and go through, we found viable particles in the death chain. What
Wow.
this yeah. Now, what this means, especially, he ended up like measuring size and all this kind of thing. He was able to determine that we're not talking about the large particle that everybody else was talking about, measuring between 1 and 1.4 microns. Super duper large coronavirus. What he found was that there are these large particles, but it's kind of like that's a mothership, and they kind of like break off, and there are breakaway pieces that are really doing most of your infecting.
Mm.
These smaller particles measure between 0.25 and zero point 0.5 microns. One, for coronaviruses, these little break-off particles, that's too large. Because the coronavirus is so large, it has developed a central core of enzyme activity that is just trying to hold that thing together. Otherwise, it's just going to fall apart and become nothing. So the the places on this virus where you can actually have any kind of mutations, very limited, because this thing is trying to just hold itself together. But
Mm.
these are larger than they should be. But even though they're larger than they should be, that 0.25 microns is important, especially when you're talking the N95. Your N95 will block particles that measure 0.3 microns or larger. Oh no. So I've got little particles that are smaller than what your N95 can stop. Forget about what you
Right.
got at 7-Eleven.
Right. Right.
And if you are exposed to this thing long enough, I could probably get you in an outdoor environment because I don't care. You have military grade, you have industrial grade. The only thing that's going to stop these little tiny particles from getting in is if you've got your own air supply. You have to be totally blocked off because this thing is small enough. If you get enough of them, they can get that 100,000, that 10 million, whatever you need, well, whatever is your number, we can get you. That's a
Okay.
scary thing.
Okay. Let me.
Well,
I'm gonna
how
stop you
long?
for a second. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
going to say, how long can the coronaviruses, withstand being out in the open and not attached to a host? Because a lot of viruses, sunlight kills them, fresh
Yeah.
air kills them. They can't sustain themselves unless they're inside of a host.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that if you know you have a virus that comes into your body, what people who have natural immunity won't even know it, but doesn't the natural immunity stave off the virus better than a so-called vaccination?
Well, this is the problem with COVID-19. It's like I found out when I got in the army that I have a quote unquote natural immunity to tear gas. The amount of tear gas that we put inside that gas chamber to freak out privates, it does nothing to me, nothing at all. But what happens is that that's really just because of the amount of the agent that I'm being exposed to. Some people, they can hold their breath underwater for 3 minutes, but at some point he's going to have to breathe. Then he's in trouble. And so the really, really big problem with COVID-19 is not what your level of immunity is, but more how long you're exposed to this. Because if you go beyond that point where your body can no longer deal with that virus, you're going to catch COVID-19. But unfortunately, we can't see this virus being in the air. We don't know how long we're being exposed to it. The only thing that we've really been able to look at, for the most part, in terms of the way that this virus has kind of spread throughout the pandemic, is that we tend to have clustered outbreaks. We also tend to have people who, when you look at the number of people that have been infected at the CDC, at least 12% of those people are not the new people. They're not unique infections. These are reinfections. That's telling us that some people are going back to the same place, staying long enough to catch COVID-19. It's a really, really scary thing. It's a
I'm
really, really
How do
asking.
you,
scary. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
how do you, okay, for instance, I had it 3 times. My wife had it 5 times. My
Yeah.
brother had it twice. His wife never had it. My
Yeah.
son and his wife never had it at all, and they were never vaccinated.
Oh yeah.
How did how does it come out that like you can be married to somebody and sleep in the same bed, and one person gets it twice and the other person never gets it? There's so many like unanswered questions. There's so much stuff that you it just raises more questions that like are they really being straight with us, or is it just a bunch of Bravo Sierra? I know you know what that
Yeah.
means, to
Oh, yeah.
get people
Yeah.
to go along with the line, and somehow if you don't go along with it, well then you want children to die or something. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
they use
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
if you don't believe in top to bottom tyranny, then well you're a fascist.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just
Yeah. And we had some fake tests out there that, and confusion is how Sun Tzu said that what all warfare is deception. And so we
Mm.
had people that were claiming that they had COVID-19 and they didn't have COVID-19. I was going after Cory Booker, and I told him, dude, you need to go into the Veterans Hospital. I can tell you what you need to look for to find where this thing is being deployed. I saw him at the Dobbs decision at the Supreme Court. He ran in the other direction. Suddenly got in the prison and said, oh, I got COVID-19. No, Cory Booker did not. He lied. But also in terms of some people actually can. In fact, we had this happen to a family in my church. The parents caught COVID-19. And their thought was that because they're the parents, they're going to give it to the children. They went into quarantine, the whole thing, and they didn't give it to the children. These guys are in the same house. They're running around. How in the world is that happening? Once they cleared quarantine, and I went to my pastor when this whole thing was going on because this just sounded too playable for these message kind of masters. The family's name was Graveson, Graveson, Graveson. And so I went to my pastor and I said, Pastor, I'll make you $1 bet. They have one little girl, she's not going to catch COVID-19. They have two little boys, they're going to catch COVID-19, they're going to go to the hospital. My pastor looked at me and he said, that's a terrible thing to say. But sure enough, after Mother's Day, after everybody had cleared through COVID-19, the two little boys caught COVID-19 and were in the hospital. Why? Because this makes a headline, grave son, hospital. But what happens is that it's really where you're exposed to the virus. I can go out to in the woods. I'm going to catch, I don't know, a poison ivy. When I come home, I may have poison ivy, but I'm not going to give it to my brother. I'm not going to give it to my sister. I'm going to be the guy with poison ivy. I got chicken pox. That's a different story. And so you actually can have a husband, a wife. They've got COVID-19. They're running around the house, and nobody else is getting infected because they can't give it to anybody. they got to pass 100,000 particles on its. Depending on what you guys are doing as a family, 100,000 particles is a lot of particles to pass. But because this is kind of like magic, magic stage illusion, I'm going to make something appear to you like something has happened. Very, very troublingly, in science, we started looking at the effects of magic, how magicians do their thing for policy purposes. And so
Right.
they literally got some guy with 1,000 people watching him. This is not David Copperfield. This is not Penn and Teller. This is just some guy who learned how to do a trick. He had a ball in his hand. He tossed that ball in the air, and everybody saw the ball go up and the ball go into his hand. He then tossed it again in the air, and it went down into his hand. The third time, he made the motion that he was tossing this ball into the air, and he palmed the ball. But 2/3 of 1,000 people saw that ball disappear in the air. They had already been conditioned. That's a lot of people. 2/3 of people got suckered by some cheap magician. You'd be surprised.
Mhm.
You'd be
Let me ask you
surprised.
this,
Now,
Markel. What questions do you have for Mike?
Okay, so Mr. Webb, I'm
go
listening.
ahead.
I'm enjoying everything that you have to
Yeah,
say.
good.
And you just said something. You said, I've had one word on my mind this whole time, but you
Yeah.
just said magic.
Oh yeah.
And my word for it is marketing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
And the whole time I'm just thinking to myself how there's a whole big marketing play here. We don't believe anything unless it's sold to us, told to us, given to us or whatever.
Sure.
And what you've provided in this interview here was a balance between what we've been given through the mainstream of marketing. You've given us an education.
Yeah.
Now, education is what we all need. I talk about this in my industry all the time, and I bring it up in every episode because I always find the link. And it makes me smile every episode because I see it and I hear it. And I love to hear when a guest such as yourself is going down that path. You're laying it out. We have been so conditioned to follow what has been fed to us until we get to the point where we get the education. And then we start to use our brain and we say, okay, now it's time for logic to start kicking in. So you break down these formulas and numbers and things like that. And it's just like, okay, well, it's not possible for it to spread that way because of this, based on facts and knowledge and things like that, instead of propaganda.
Yeah.
Right.
And whatever's convenient for whatever story or end result that whoever is pushing the narrative is trying to give you. So I'm looking at it, and part of my job is to see what's going on, be able to identify how to re-engineer what's going on. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint of marketing and the fact that it's so powerful that, of course, in the wrong hands, you could do great harm with it. But if you put it in the right people's hands, you can definitely get some great results and great positive things working to rebuild instead of destroy.
Mm.
I don't know what the purpose of this pandemic supposed to be. And earlier today, I actually saw somebody posted a YouTube short, and it was showing, I don't know, I assume it was chopped up, but the basic caption was that Biden references a new possible pandemic. So I guess in the interview that it was chopped from, Biden was asked, why does the government or so need so much money? And he said, it's not that the government needs so much money, it's that we need vaccines. We need things like that to protect the kids, because there will be more pandemics. There will be another pandemic, something to come.
Yeah.
So it's the wording, it's the marketing, it's how you make people feel and what you make people more geared towards. And then you have the science on the other side that's really going to help you or destroy you. And most people don't follow the science and the knowledge of it for the purposes of making the best decisions. We've made decisions where half the country, being kind of split, made the decision based off of marketing, based off of the word of a doctor who, if anybody's pulled up his credentials and that, I don't know. One day, in my opinion, he popped up one day. He was the expert that everybody was supposed to listen to. I've seen him get called out on, it was a snippet of the Today Show with Whoopi on there. He was sitting there in the review. He was sitting there,
The View,
and the gentleman said to him, "You're responsible for all these problems." He said, "Did you know that because of your negligence and all this stuff?" And he just said it to him straight out like that. Like, if it wasn't for you making these claims and this, that, and the third, that you knew that there was no evidence or this, that, and the third behind, we wouldn't be in this situation. And he just sat there. He didn't rebuttal it. He didn't say anything. But it's like, I could see him being in court for the next however long period, answering questions and going back and forth. And like you said, he'll be far long gone before we probably really know the true results of whatever was done. What's even worse is the thought that, why was this done? Like, and just starting off from the beginning, because I still remember what you said in the beginning, that they called you, and you didn't even ask for a job in this. You wasn't even looking for nothing. So the idea of marketing and pre-planning, something that's made by design.
Oh yeah, yeah, and this is the thing, is that, I mean, in fact, Encyclopedia Britannica actually says it straight out. They say biological warfare is the oldest weapon of, it's not really mass destruction, it's terror. The Assyrians were doing this to their enemies.
Yes.
And the we don't call biological warfare a weapon of mass destruction, because it's kind of like when we decided we were going to use the atom and do nuclear bombs. Okay, if this thing gets out of control, I'm going to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt myself. I want to hurt my enemy. And so we always want to control what this thing is. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, and there are very, very basic rules that can help you to understand why what they were telling us is just bogus. So we need vaccines. Well, one, if you don't know what is going to zoonotically evolve, how do you already have a vaccine unless you time travel? Or you can't predict what that doesn't even make any sense. But they sell this crazy thing. But what science knows, and they don't tell us, is virus particles are the most abundant biological particles in the world. It's kind of like looking up at the stars, looking up at the heavens and saying, you know, there are so many stars out there, there has to be intelligent life out there. That's your virus population here on Earth. Do you know how many viruses were harmful to mankind before this novel coronavirus? You would expect a lot. With all of these possibilities, 219. Only 219. How could that be? They have all of these chances. Well, there's a reason. Viruses are just RNA, DNA that became invasive in some creature. That's it. You know, just like we have cancerous cells, these were just, you know, RNA who decided, I'm doing my own thing. And so what does your body do when parts of your body decide that they don't want to be along with everybody else. You expel it, you cough it out, you sneeze it out. But now the question is that little new RNA, DNA going to be a problem for somebody else?
Yeah.
And so this is kind of how we kind of had kind of spillover between birds and all this crazy kind of stuff. But we've learned a lot about, particularly coronaviruses. Coronaviruses for humans, really, the only threat that they were, we discovered the first human coronavirus in 1965. And the way that this thing got discovered, it sounded like we were trying to play biological warfare. Because in the United Kingdom, they had a man and a woman both looking for the cause of the common cold. In the United States, they had a man and a woman looking for the cause of the common cold. It was kind of like a space race for the common cold. England, the United States, they both discovered this thing at the same time, OC229E. Little tiny coronavirus. They find it, they're looking at it under the electron microscope. But the first thing that they say is alarming is that they sat there and they said, you know what? This looks like a chicken coronavirus. This is weird because the very, very first coronavirus that we ever started to filter and discover and look at when we finally got electron microscopes was a chicken coronavirus. In 1932 to 1936, it was running wild only in the Midwest, out by like Fort Riley, where we happened to have the Spanish flu start.
Okay.
Just happened to have the Spanish flu start. We also started to gear up for World War II and a lot of things going on. The way that this first virus kind of cropped up, it sounds like we were playing with viruses and things like that back then. 1965, we're definitely playing with viruses and things in 1965 because now you're like as old as I am. And so, you know, when we were kids, if you got sick, what did you do? Honey and lemon, you had some kind of home remedy. But guess what we have today? We have a $40 billion cold and flu industry. You want to get your you want to get your fix. You want to, and so what happened was we discovered this OC229E in 1965, and the funniest thing happened after we discovered it. Somehow it escaped. How did this virus just walk out of the lab? It's one little tiny piece of the cocktails that create your common cold, but somehow in both labs, two continents, both of them walked out the lab and nobody knew where they went. Well, we also had an explosion of the pharmaceutical industry doing cold and flu. But that was the end of the coronavirus problem for a long, long time. We don't see any other coronaviruses kind of popping up, becoming a problem to mankind until SARS, 2003.
Yup.
But
And don't forget MERS. They had MERS too. The
2012.
MERS.
That's 2012, but there's a lot that happens between 2003 and 2012. One of the things that happens is that between 2003 and 2005, all of a sudden, 5 new coronaviruses show up that are a problem to mankind. How in the world did the coronavirus population suddenly start attacking mankind? That just sounds weird. I mean, they were stable. We were friends. It's kind of like George on Seinfeld. He had a deal with the squirrels, and suddenly they broke the deal. That's what happened with coronaviruses between 2003 and 2005. But if you look at the coronaviruses, is that all of a sudden became a problem between 2003 and 2005. They all come from bats. They all come from not Wuhan, Yunnan, China. We never talk about Yunnan, China, but all of our sudden new viruses somehow have a connection to Yunnan, China. We also happen to have a biological lab in Yunnan, China that nobody ever talks about. The only reason why they put that lab there was because they had so many bats they could play with. All of our coronaviruses that have kind of sprung up in the past few years, They've all come from this. Even when you look at MERS, and MERS is an interesting thing because it's kind of like SARS. MERS emerged in 2012, our 219th virus harmful to mankind. It shows up in Saudi Arabia, and the studies that we produce, CDC, all of these other people, the World Health Organization, the one thing that they know is that you have to be around MERS a long time just to catch it. It's not a highly contagious disease. Even though it has a distant relative that's a bat in Yunnan, the most direct, I guess they're calling it a intermediary spillover source, was a dromedary camel. But when we looked at all of the cases of MERS that occurred on the Arabian Peninsula, not one camel handler caught MERS. How could you be around camels all the time and you're not catching MERS? That doesn't make any sense. You guys are around the camels the most. What? Okay, well, maybe they have natural immunity. Okay, let's go with that. They have natural immunity. They're around the camels. Okay, well, but how did this camel get in contact with the bat in Yunnan, China? That's kind of weird. But also, it gets even weirder because all of your cases of MERS, they all happened inside hospitals. It
Wow.
wasn't going over to your town. It wasn't going. It was evidently camels were sneaking into the hospitals at night. They were infecting these people and killing them. That doesn't make any sense. No,
That's
what we
right.
had, what we had was we created this virus. It looked like it came from a camel, and we put that inside the inside hospital and got these people sick.
Well, let me ask you this, Mike, as we kind of wind down to the
Oh
end.
yeah.
What is the current status of your lawsuits? How many did you have originally? What's left over? And what seems to be the difficulty in you moving forward to get your day in court to prove
Yeah.
your perspective?
In part, right now, we're starting to see more things on COVID-19 in terms of the truth because now we're beyond statutes of limitation. This is what they're
Okay.
worried about. There's an old Fletcher v. Rowlands rule, goes back to 1868. We always use it against chemical factories and all this kind of thing. If I create a problem and it escapes, if it gets on everybody else, that means I'm liable for that problem. So everybody wants to get beyond that 2 years. Yes, you know what? It did come out of a lab, but sorry, statute of limitations, I can't. Same thing with the with vaccines. What they're doing is they kind of want to get beyond this period where they can say, you know, I'm really, really sorry that happened, but you can't get me in court. I've gone kind of beyond that date.
Mm-hmm.
In court, also, I had to kind of evolve. I mean, like I went in with a naive attitude. Okay, guys, here's the truth, and the truth is going to set us free, and then we're going to have a Disney ending. Well, I ran into some bad people, and they taught me, okay, I have to evolve in court to kind of figure out how to get things going. One of the best cases that we have right now is this crazy Freedom of Information Act request case. That's the one that got me kicked off of Facebook, and so we're in the D.C. Court of Appeals on that. Use the FACE Act. They blocked my access to church, so they should be liable. But with the White House, what they when you have a FOIA, you got nine possible reasons why you can say I'm not going to give this to you. Otherwise, FOIA, it's like putting pennies inside a gumball machine. You put the penny in and you get stuff out. But what happened with me was they knew that I wanted something in particular. They knew that I knew what I was going to do with it. I wasn't on just a fishing expedition, give me anything and let me try to find something. I knew exactly what I wanted in this whole thing. And so the White House decided, okay, we're just not going to say anything. Well, you can't do that either, but they
Right.
did. And so now I've kind of upped the ante inside litigation. I've asked for sanctions against the White House counsel. They're supposed to have a hearing for one of their motions on August 16th, or at least one of their responses is going to be due. Another one at the end of the month. But what I decided to do was first I tried to sue the judge that was that was over the case. After she tried to dismiss Facebook, I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to change the name of my lead defendant, Judge. Now you are my lead defendant. She decided she was going to quietly dismiss the case against herself. So now I've got that up at the Judicial Review Board, and
Okay.
they're looking at it. I mean, you really have to go in kind of hard tack. With DOD, I have one case right now. It's over the DC Court of Appeals. Um, we know how many soldiers we have. We know when they don't show up in formation. We know 94% of them took the shot. I asked a simple FOIA question. I want to know how many excess fatalities you have during the period that you were making people get the shot. If
Right.
suddenly, I mean, it's an easy way to find out. If these things are safe, then we don't have to worry. But DOD decided that they didn't want to answer that. And so we are now in court just trying to get them to answer that, and that's just kind of moving along. Also, what I started to do this year was go into state court because one, federal court started to get expensive. And also, you can have a more of a local impact when you go into state court. And
Mhm.
so we knew exactly a lot of things early on when we decided we're going to close these schools on these kids, start our learning loss. Virginia's the sixth ranked state for learning loss. We lost more in pandemic than Alabama, Mississippi, and everybody else. And nobody is concerned about that. How come our teachers aren't sitting there saying, "Hey guys, we have to fix this learning loss. This means this kid's not going to get into college. He doesn't have the knowledge that he was supposed to have. He had a 12-year contract and he got 10 years. Give me at least back what I was supposed to get inside my education." We've kind of gone beyond the 30 days that parents, guardians, custodians could have challenged the school board when they decided to do these crazy things. And so I decided I was going to do what we did when the Freedom Riders got killed down in Mississippi. It's a law called the Mississippi Burning Law because of what happened down in Mississippi. Basically, it's conspiracy to violate civil rights. We got
Okay.
30,000 kids in Arlington. Their civil rights were violated. We got Brown v. Board of Education. And so I said, okay, well, prosecutor, unless this superintendent can tell you a good reason why he decided he was going to close schools, you need to put him in jail because that's at least criminal negligence.
Right.
The
So
judge decided.
you have all those cases, and
Yeah,
what you're just looking for the government to, I guess, speak the truth and
speak the
kind of back
truth.
up the things that they say. How much
Sure.
longer do you think you're going to be in litigation?
Oh, the estimate changes every day.
Mhm.
I'm surprised when suddenly people start to act like they are concerned about things. I had tried to go against the Veterans Administration on the masks. They were still doing masks in May of 2022.
Uh-huh.
I walked into now 12,000 veterans have died inside that facility. That should tell you that the masks are not working, but they still were requiring these masks. And so I decided I was going to take them to court, and the Veterans Administration, because they had to play the okie doke, they kept the signs up. But if you took off your mask in veterans facility, they weren't going to throw you in jail. Now I'm in court, even though the Veterans Administration has kind of backed away from their extremist position. The judge, I got Judge Mehta, he was the anthrax judge. He has a reputation he wants to maintain. He doesn't want to be the judge that stood up for stupidity. And so he just decided that we're just not going to move forward. And so now I'm pressing him with judicial complaints and everything else to get the case moving. Make a decision, judge. Tell everybody that these masks don't work. But because of pressures that be, he doesn't want to move at this point. We had the same kind of success. I sued four black churches from Harlem down to Atlanta on the vaccines. They mandated people to get not only the vaccines, they mandated them to get the Johnson product. The Johnson and Johnson product, this thing was never approved by the FDA. It had its EUA revoked. Pastor, what do you do? Want to use Jim Jones? And
Wow.
yeah. And three of the churches, Abyssinia up in Harlem, Shiloh over in Washington, Alfred Street in Alexandria, large, old historic black churches. They said, "Okay, Mike, no problem, no mas. Okay, we're going to get rid of the mandate. It's gone. Nothing official in court. We're still going to, we don't want to be on paper.
Right.
Whether that glorifies God or not is another thing. But we'll agree quietly. But of course, Senator Warnock has got Martin Luther King's church. He's doing his, I don't know, wannabe president thing. And so he said, no, the people at Ebenezer Baptist Church are going to take these vaccines because I say so, and that's really kind of a sad thing to be happening in Martin Luther King's church.
I understand. Well, Jeff, you have any closing thoughts for Mike?
Yeah, I just want to two questions. First of
Yeah.
all, do you think the whole pandemic was a dry run to see just how far they could push the people before the
Oh
people
yeah,
pushed back? Number
yeah.
two, being a former Army officer myself from the reserves,
Thank you for
I
your
was just
service.
curious if you did a lot of your training with the Chemical Corps at Fort McClellan, Alabama, or the Research Center at Fort Detrick. If you
Well,
are at liberty to answer that.
yeah, I can. I was with the 902nd. Most of the stuff down McClellan was gone by the time I got there. Mostly stuff that we were dealing with was at Detroit. And Yeah, but it was interesting because I wasn't really I've had to become the subject matter expert, but my training was really just as a tactical intelligence officer.
Mm.
I'm looking around for, how are things moving? One of the things I used to do, I ended up in the strategic counterintelligence. I ended up doing red teams. I was the guy who would sit there and say, okay, do we have a security breach at the White House? Can you get into the White House and not get caught? And so I just kind of apply that methodology to just about everything. And yeah, that's kind of how I kind of piece my way through pandemic, because a lot of it's just the same kind of thing. I mean, you're talking about one, you have to breach something, you have to exploit, and then hopefully you have a way to kind of get out.
Well,
Wow.
thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you so
Mar-
much.
Markel, you have any closing questions or thoughts for Mike?
Oh man. Once again, definitely appreciate you. You gave so much value. Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is that if you ever gotta go to war for whatever you believe in, make sure you have your facts and your information down.
Oh yeah.
Make sure you have all your stuff going. And also make sure that you're willing to go to war and stay in that war. And Mr. Webb, from what I hear, you checking the boxes. And just to think that people like yourself that have the information, it's so hard to fight a battle such as like what you're doing when you have such a viable opponent in the government. When you think about money and funding and stuff like that, not even just money, it's just, hey, they're making a call or saying, hey, yeah, don't accept his calls or don't accept this and that. And you have to stand on knowledge and persistence and just saying, hey, I'm not going to let you do what you're doing. And I can see it blind and clearly. And other people can't see it, but if I could get the message out to enough people, maybe people will start seeing it and taking up the charge more to help in this fight.
Yeah.
But it's motivating to me to hear somebody that has the information and just like, damn, I'm thinking to myself, man, whatever this government done did, man, they done did it to the wrong person.
Oh
like,
yeah. Well,
like this brother
yeah.
here, he ain't, yo, like, and it's just about that. You got to be willing to stand on what it is, make sure that it's a worthy fight. And I think what you're doing is very worthy because just like Jeff said, do you think that this is just a precursor to something else? Of
Oh
course,
yeah.
one of the things you mentioned was I think you said the first instance of the coronavirus. It was before an upcoming war. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking in my head, okay, things repeat. Like
Amen.
for something, hey, preparation again. What happened that second time? Was it before another one that we was impending on? Now we're about to go into the craziest election season that we've ever seen. So
Mhm.
how far in advance was this planning? When we think
Oh,
about
it's
neighborhoods,
oh, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you probably wasn't the first person that they called. It called somebody a year
Well,
before you, and like,
this is the interesting thing about that. I did a targeted FOIA again when I got this job. Normally, people sue the government because they didn't get a job.
Hmm,
And so organizations are used to, okay, yeah, okay, here's the file. Try to sue us and say that we tried to discriminate you because you were green or your hair was whatever. But I asked the funny question. I said, guys, I was sitting around minding my own business, and they offered me a job, and so I want to know what they were looking at to sit there and suddenly decide to give me a job I didn't apply for it. I ended up getting a document that now I mean everybody wants to have a top secret clearance job and all this kind of stuff. But by the time we get to December of 2015, there were only three people in the entire United States that they wanted for this job. I happened to be one. The first guy, he decided when he got the job offer, there was some other cool job he wanted to do that was paying more money. And so he took that job. And so then by the time we get to December 2015, it's just down to two of us. And I was, I guess, like the number two guy. And who knows who this other guy was. But evidently, we were around this kind of stuff long enough to that they thought that we might be helpful in the things. I'm particularly upset because they were not going to pay me six figures to kill 7 million people. You
Mm.
want me to kill 7 million people? Come on, come on, come on. But one thing that we have to deal with is the we are programmed by movies. My mom used to say, "Don't watch the boob tube because your mind's going to turn to mush." We are conditioned in terms of how we're going to look at things. Also, the mask, there's a wonderful study that Ralph Northam relied on for his mask science. Guy Jeremy Howard did a 4-page study on masks. There's no science in it. Well, the only science in it is it says the reason why you're wearing this mask is to be basically marketing for the pandemic. You see the mask, boom, we're a pandemic. Okay, this is going to reinforce compliance. And most of us tend to be followers. Everybody else is doing this, so I'm going to do this. But the best thing that I have found in terms of the Bible, Dad was a pastor, and I look at John, interesting book. John, it's not written like the rest of the Gospels. They call them the Synoptic Gospels. They call this the Johannine Gospels. This was written for a community that was trying to be undercover. And so there are actually some wonderful counterintelligence spy lessons in the book of John. The best story is the healing of the blind man. Healing of the blind man, we have a lot of interesting counterintelligence kind of aspects, but this is some guy who now is pulled in by the city official, pulled in by the religious officials, pulled in by everybody. Tell us how come you can now see. We want to put somebody in jail. This is just not right. This guy, what he does is he just sticks to his story. He couldn't see when he got healed. He couldn't even
Wow.
see Jesus. He just said, "I'm going to tell you the story that I know. I'm not going to make stuff up. I'm not going to try to hypothesize. I'm just going to tell you what I know." And what
Right, right.
happened was that everybody kept coming at him, coming at him, coming at him. They're changing their story, but he's staying where he is. By the
True.
time he gets to the end of this story, he's sitting there saying, "You know what? I am so confident. Why don't you come to Jesus with me? Because I'm confident. He brought me some sight, and so you need to do this too." That's when they said, "Dude, you got to get out of here."
Right,
He was now
right.
too strong. when you're climbing a mountain, you're going to try to maintain 3 points of contact. Don't make that leap of faith. Don't be
Yep.
sliced alone.
Yep.
Stay on that mountain and you're going to make it up. And so that's how you kind of go against these. But now other people, they start to see you having success. What are they
Right.
going to do? They want to be successful too. They're
Right.
going to start going the way that you go. And that's literally how it goes.
Wow. Well, like I
Awesome.
said, we have long should have had you on here, Mike, and I know we
Yeah.
kept in touch all this time. What we're gonna do is when we edit, we'll put your Substack contact underneath you so that people can read some of your articles because they are always written in a different perspective, little bit of comedy, little bit of
Right.
politics, little bit of court examples. So I always appreciate you sending me those links so I can stay ahead of the game. Are there any social media links that you like to give the fans so that they can kind of touch base with you on the social
Oh
media?
yeah, sure. I've got a YouTube. I use a lot of voices and drama and all this kind of stuff to kind of make this stuff. I like to say Sesame Street stupid, so everybody can kind of understand. I have one. It's kind of a Top Gun mission brief for how this virus got from Yunnan to Wuhan, and so
Okay.
we have we have the Top Gun version, and we also have a Tommy Lee Jones fugitive version.
Okay.
But it's on my YouTube. Major Mike Webb for Virginia, on YouTube,
Okay.
and the videos have actually been kind of fun. I'm starting to branch out on TikTok. It's a different audience, and so I have to keep it under 10 minutes. But yeah, definitely there. And now I just started. I'm trying to get on the ballot for Congress to disrupt here, and so now I'm major4ba.org. And
Okay.
mainly right now, it's just focused on the school reopening litigation.
Do you have your signature straight for your congressional run or?
Well, we're in court fighting that. We're in
Okay.
court. I'm trying to bring the number down because it's just
Okay.
ridiculous that they're trying to get 1,000 signatures in this district. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, man, we appreciate you being on.
Hey,
Again, we
cool.
are
Thank
Talks
you.
Over Drinks. My name is Corey Fauconier. As always, my partner in justice, God Markel Prines, my brother of another color, Jeff Webb, and the Major Mike Webb, sir. We appreciate your service and all that you're fighting for so that Virginians can know what's going on with the government. We are
Good
Talks
night,
Over
gentlemen.
Drinks, and we'll check y'all out. Cheers.
Good night.
Well, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free.
Alright, let's talk over drink.
Talks over drinks, talks over drinks. We can have a conversation. You can say what you think. I'm 40 plus and still rocking to this hip hop beat. Bring it live and direct right here from Broad Street. I pray that my lyrics do find you well, cause it's me, MSB, and a guy named Markel. The White Jason, you know he fan. Invite indie musicians coming straight slam. I got swerving B sounds on the ones and twos, and together, united, we gon' bring it to you. We the RVA Rap Pack crew. So take your pick, Comcast or YouTube. No disrespect, I don't mean to be rude, but these other talk shows can't do what we do. I stay with the lyrics, some call me Dread Dude. Difference of opinion should not be called sin. Tell the truth, yo Dread, where you been? Invest a few minutes, I hope you tune in, yo. Politics, economics, education. These are topics across the whole entire nation. Keep it 100, we gon' talk about them, yo. Bring your kids, tell your mama and a friend, yo, it's Toast Over Drinks, Toast Over Drinks. We can have a conversation, you can say what you think.
Let's talk over drink. Pull up a chair and let's chill. Let's party, let's talk and let's build. Alright, let's talk over drink. We over here keeping it real, saying exactly how we feel. Come on, let's talk over drink. Pull up a chair and let's chill. Let's party, let's talk, and let's build. Yeah, alright. Let's talk over drink.